Welcome back to another episode of Live and Invest Abroad, the podcast where we explore the endless opportunities for living, investing, and thriving around the world. I'm your host, Vanessa Rosenblum, and today we have a truly special guest who is going to help us unlock the evolving world of global mobility. Now, joining me is Mohamed Bennis. He's the Associate VP at Arton Capital, and Mohamed is an expert in citizenship and residency by investment. He guides high net worth individuals, families, and businesses through the complex landscape of global migration. So he's not just about passports and visas. Mohamed helps clients gain strategic advantages in a rapidly shifting world. And we're going to talk about how you can take advantage of those opportunities and highlight some of the most interesting and competitive programs available across the world. Let's dive in. Hi, Mohamed. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to dive into this conversation because I think my listeners are really interested in understanding the landscape of global mobility and how it's changing and how they can future-proof themselves and their families. So thank you.
You're
Let's
welcome.
kind of start by learning a little bit about you. How did you get into this business and what's your background?
My background is basically I got into the immigration business through the public servant. I was 22 years old when I started working part-time for a Ministry of Immigration of Canada, actually the province of Quebec within the Canadian territory. And I was still in university in political science, so I had the bug. And from there, I went on to work for three different ministers of immigration, back to back for 6 years. And then I had the fortunate luck to go to Hong Kong to take care of the Quebec Immigrant Investor Program along with my colleagues. So we stayed there a few years in Hong Kong, which was a great experience. We were able to really see what kind of investors was coming into Quebec and Canada and really go through the whole process of making sure that we were getting the right clients through the program. And then stayed for a number of years as a civil servant, the what we call a immigration officer for the Quebec government until a few years back. I joined Arton Capital as associate vice president for North America.
Okay, great. And what does Arton Capital do for its clients?
Arton Capital has many subsidiaries, but if I had to sum up, the first and foremost is we're citizenship and residency advisory firm. So basically, we will really advise our client not on any investments of any kind, but more on the citizenship and residency side, how our clients can acquire through contribution, donation, investment, a what we call a golden visa that gives them a residency in Europe, citizenship by investment. This will basically in the Caribbeans, they are allowed to invest into getting a passport right away without the physical requirement of a residency. There's different products, but it's basically for people to use their investment or donation funds as a medium to get a not fast track, but streamlined way of getting a citizenship and residency across the world.
Who is your typical client? I mean, who uses this vehicle to obtain a second passport?
So immigration is quite broad, especially for the programs. You can go from asylum seekers all the way to the investor. So you have skilled workers, you have entrepreneurs. We at Arden Capital focus on a niche category of the client, which is investors. And what we call investors is someone that has a substantial asset, substantial net worth in terms of assets, that can take a chunk of that liquidity and invest it in getting a citizenship or residency, depending on the program and country they choose. The We have what we call alpha clients. We have the first one that comes from a country that has the original passport that is quite restrictive and limited in terms of tourism, in terms of just mobility, broad and simple. They would like to go to Europe for a personal reason. They cannot. They have a passport that limits them in terms of visa-free travel. And that person is also has the means and capacity to be an investor into a program like a golden visa program to be able to access that. And then we have the business expansion person, the person that needs to quickly fly somewhere, and again, has a restrictive passport or a passport that doesn't give them access to a certain jurisdiction, a certain country, to be able to continue the business expansion. So that would be another client, the alpha client that we have. And then I would say the third client would be a client that is looking for a relocation, a plan B, whether it's medium, short term, even long term, linked to the studies of young children that could have access to university down the line for Europe and other places, and even in the Caribbean that have a relocation aspect to someone that's 50 years old, would like to get a citizenship by investment in the Caribbeans and wants to park their boat there or just has a plan for it. So there's different reasons, I would say, really personal relocation, planning a plan B, even sometimes a plan C, or just acquiring multiple citizenship, basically just like an asset, the same way as you would buy a third home that you don't really live there much of the time, but it's there. Same thing as people sometimes treat citizenship and residency in the same spectrum.
Got it. Okay. We talked about this a little bit in our pre-call, but how have things shifted since the election in the United States? What are you hearing from US citizens who are calling you at this point, and are you seeing an uptick?
We've seen actually 500% uptick on requests from the United States and Canada, and especially United States because there's also more people. But the election brought a lot of uncertainty, and also the fact that the United States right now is a little bit fragile in terms of diplomacy and international relations. And it's more of a fact more than an opinion. And that brings its load of uncertainty in terms of, let's say I'm someone that has a substantial asset or net worth in the United States, I would like a plan B. So I would like just a plan for relocation, plan to make sure that I have unrestricted access for my business expansion. So they tend to have a 2 to 3 products that they have in mind, either the Caribbeans, but a lot actually in Europe, where Portugal, Greece are very in demand from the US citizens, strictly because there's also the pleasure aspect to it of having a residency in countries that are fairly nice. And up until very recently, Spain also had a golden visa that was very on demand and that is looking to be revamped slash terminated by April of this year. But there's always going to be a demand. Even if it closes, it will come back in another shape because there is a demand in that space, and they'll just make it a little bit either sometimes more restrictive or more expensive to get a golden visa. And that brings me back to also the time frame. A lot of people like to wait to see if these programs get cheaper or get easier to apply. And unfortunately, they either get canceled, they get more restrictive, or they get more expensive.
I think about that, especially for Americans. I live in Spain and I see a big influx. You should see the expat chat boards are just filled with Americans thinking about moving to Spain, in my case. And you always think about when there's a big uh, push in migration, the people who get out early have all the options. And then those doors start to close. When we saw that in Ukraine and we see that over and over, right?
Yeah.
Do you foresee that? Do you see any governments start to pull back on allowing US citizens access to their programs, or do you foresee that being an issue specifically for Americans at some point in the near future?
We've already had such problematic. Recently, Hungary opened a golden visa. I would say Hungary might not be a favorite of US citizens for different reasons, political, etc., but they still opened a golden visa that is popular for other citizenships. However, because of that, there is a few nationalities that are banned from applying to Hungary, and United citizens are one of those.
Wow.
Russians, Ukrainians, Belarus, and Americans cannot apply to the Hungarian golden visa. I'll give you another example where Greece basically kicks out your dependent children when they become adults. So there's a certain age where they can only renew so much. So the main applicant, which is the person with their spouse, is always linked to the golden visa. Example for Greece with the real estate. And as long as they have the real estate, they can renew their residency. But at one point, the children get kicked out. And we will see that more and more in a restrictive manner for every time a golden visa gets revamped or gets relaunched, they will always make it a little bit harder for the whole family to stick together for one investment. Because the country will create a golden visa for one specific purpose, is to create a new capital flow to the country. And with that, they would rather have multiple investment for multiple adults in the application rather than one investment that engulfs everybody in the application as a
Right.
grandfather club.
That makes sense. I think that goes back to if you think you should have a plan B or you think you should go, you should probably get on it and not wait. It's the ones who wait that don't have as
Yeah.
many options, right? Unfortunately. We're talking about how this landscape is shifting. What other shifts are you seeing in in these programs worldwide? What should we be looking out for in the next 5 years, let's say?
Actually, we have to look at the visa-free travel. Diplomacy was given us for granted that a US citizenship gets you anywhere. However, we've seen that just for Canada and the United States, we last week we woke up to a tariff war, global tariff war that could have resulted in a very bad implication in terms of visa-free travel between the two countries that we could have never expected a visa-free travel ban. So that just gave us a little bit of a wake-up call in terms of taking for granted what the U.S. citizenship or U.S. passport gives you in terms of travel. So I think that if a person can afford it, and if, of course, it's not an emotional decision, it should be a very thought decision with your financial advisor, with your tax planner, and of course, a citizenship advisor like Arton Capital, but it will be more restrictive to travel. And whether we see it in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, it will happen. We also saw for the last 3 years that European citizen that wanted to come to the United States needed an e-visa, which is a formality in many cases. But we happened to have a anecdote to share for the New York Real Estate Expo, where I was a panelist. There was a Portuguese lawyer that was missing in the panel because he was not granted the e-visa to come to New York because he had traveled to a sensitive area around the world and he became a security risk all of a sudden. So their passport is not granting them visa-free travel anymore to the United States. They have to go through a additional step. And right now, the United States will have the same hurdle to do. Although, again, it's a formality for most, but it's still it points to a restrictive access to Europe for the United States as of March. And it's been wanting to be implemented 2 years ago, but they keep pushing the date. Now it's March 2025, where US citizens will need an e-visa before they travel to Europe. And it's already implemented for the United Kingdom as of January of this year. They need also an e-visa, which means you go online, you fill out a form, you identify why you're going to the United Kingdom, et cetera, et cetera. Again, formality for most, but it just shows that there's going to be more and more hurdles to travel, and the taking for granted that the US passport gets us anywhere will be a thing of the past.
So in 2025, what are some of the hottest programs? What are the programs that if somebody has the net worth to support it, what programs do you talk
Mhm.
about first?
A program that was hot before and became very cold and now is coming back is Portugal Golden Visa. They used to allow you to invest into real estate that would grant you a golden visa that you could renew every 2 years. And that would eventually gives you a fairly easy path to citizenship, given that you do a small physical trip to Portugal every 2 years, that you maintain your investment, and that you learn a little bit of Portuguese. It created an immense backlog in the last few years. So many people that did not have access to Europe with their original passport did not care for Portugal anymore for Golden Visa. They went to the CBI programs in Caribbeans to get a passport. They would go to a residency through Greece that would go faster. Portugal became a very almost too good to be true product for US citizens because they already have access to Europe somewhat as a tourist with the visa-free travel, with their citizenship, even with the implementation of the e-visa that's coming in. And they didn't mind the waiting period, which was about a year and a half to 2 years for someone to get a residency to Portugal with the golden visa investment. One, this backlog is getting resolved. The Portuguese government is working on it to expunge the backlog by the end of this year. And two, it almost became a passive way of getting a citizenship for US citizens. They do the investment, they apply, they're not in a hurry to get the residency because they already have access to Europe and Portugal with their original passport. And once they get granted temporary residency with the golden visa, they just had to abide by these three little rules. Keep your investment current, which is 500,000 euros in a private equity fund today. There's other ways of doing it, but that's the way that is most preferred. Do 14 days every 2 years in Portugal, which is more than doable, and learn an A2 level proficiency of Portuguese, which is very basic. It's elementary level. So those were the only three requirements to, after 5 years, be eligible for a passport. So that became as I said, too good to be true product for US citizens, but a very bad product for someone outside of US that didn't have access to Europe as a visa-free travel with their original passport, which became that was the reality. So Portugal right now is the hot ticket for US citizens that want a residency linked to their investment and that have an easy path to eligibility for a citizenship request.
Well, let's talk about that investment. You mentioned a private equity fund. Is real estate still an option, or does it have to be in a fund?
Unfortunately, real estate was taken out in October 2023. People that had already invested in real estate and applied and beyond 2023 were still eligible to renew their golden visa as long as they held the real estate, but no new application linked to real estate investment could be granted. So now they have a donation to the arts and cultures, which is 250,000 euros, which is not very popular among their clients because they would rather do the private equity fund investment at 500,000 euros minimum to be able to be granted the golden visa. There's other options that are more restrictive. You have to create companies, inject capital, guarantee jobs. We try to go away from these restrictive options. So that's why our clients are usually opting for either the donation, which is, I would say, 5 to 10%, and the rest, which is the bulk of our client, is for the private equity fund that we do not manage. We build their immigration file through our Arton Capital office in Portugal, and we also stay with them through the fund. So once they have a fund, they've invested in it, they give us the share ticket that they've invested in that guarantee that there's 500,000 euros investment. And with that, we're able to file an immigration golden visa claim.
Okay, so let's talk about these investment funds. What kind of ROI can they expect? What's the risk profile of these investment funds?
There's various funds. They all share the same similarities that they have to be registered. So although they are private equity funds, they have to be registered with the equivalent of the SEC. It's a Portuguese term that I would not dare repeat. It's quite hard to say, but it's a regulating body. So these funds are listed. And beyond that, they have to at least have 500,000 euros investment in it. Most people will not invest beyond that because the investment is not linked to making huge return. It's linked to applying for your golden visa. So they stop at the required minimum of 500,000. Now there's different funds. There's funds for AI. There's funds for co-working spaces. There's funds for hospitality, which means hotel operations. There's funds for indexes, multi-fund exposure. There's a dime a dozen. However, the more return that's promised, the higher the risk, and the lower return, the lower risk. There is no capital guarantee in these funds because once you guarantee capital, then you're going against the whole premise of investing into the country through a private equity fund. So there is some level of risk and the client has to be aware of that. However, we try to always be with the client, and when the client chooses a fund, they also do a due diligence with the fund. The lawyers get involved. So it's not something that you can do in a week. It takes a few weeks, 2 to 3 months ordeal to be able to do this in a proper manner.
Makes sense. So let's say somebody calls you, they say they want to take advantage of the Portuguese program and they follow up, they do their part, they send in their paperwork. What's the time frame from start to residency?
I would say start to application. I would say 3 months on an average. Could be a bit faster, could be a bit longer. And then right now, the residency after application takes about a year and a half to 2 years. The good thing is that the IAMA, which is the equivalent of the immigration department, is expunging the backlog at a rapid rate. And they are claiming that they can process files much faster. The files are digitized. There's no need to send certain documents by mail. So it's making the process faster. It has been documented that the government wants the backlog of about 300 and something thousand files to be expunged by summer 2025. If they do half of that, then we'll probably look at a time frame of less than a year. But then again, it's, don't quote me on it, it's more of a government. And every time you deal with governments, you deal with the fact that they control the process. Once you file the application, they control the process at 100%. There's a lot of people who claim that we can send letters, I can call, I can have a contact here and there. It doesn't work like that anymore, if ever it worked like that. So it's really, you have to trust the process in terms of, if we file a complete documentation, then you have to let the government do their due diligence and take care of your file in a proper manner. But I have good faith that whatever long process exists now, it will be greatly reduced by the end of this year.
Okay. So Greece and Portugal are the big popular programs in Europe. Are there any others that are a close third to those two?
Yeah, I would say Malta. Malta comes in close third because Malta has two ways of, it's either you do a citizenship or a residency application. Citizenship application, we're talking about north of $1 million in terms of donation if you want it within 12 months. So these clients are really geared towards ultra high net worth. So it's not a client that we get every day. They have a specific reason why they need the passport. They need it fast, and they don't have time to wait for that 5 years for Portugal. Or they do a residency. Again, it's a donation. It will be under 200,000 USD, and you can include the whole family. But that residency will never give you access to an easy path to citizenship like Portugal. It will ask, if ever you would like the citizenship, you have to actually live in Malta and learn the language, show ties to the country. And although the requirement, if I believe from memory, 7 years to live there continuously,
Wow.
it's
Okay.
much longer before you're actually unofficially eligible for citizenship. So it's not, if you want a citizenship in Malta, you do not do the residency donation. You either do the donation of 1 million euro plus, or you go to another country if the citizenship is a requirement for your application. Greece is the same thing. Greece will be 250,000 euros investment in real estate. So we're looking already at 50% off Portugal. So you say, why would I do Portugal if I can invest half the price for Greece? Greece remains the same problem as Malta. If you want a citizenship down the line, you actually have to start living there continuously for 7 years in Greece and learn the Greek language fluently.
Oh,
Versus
yes.
Portugal, it's at a minimal level. If you're young, you're in your 20s, you have some sort of trust fund, it's Greece is something that you really you're adamant about it, and you want to learn the culture, learn the language, and you don't mind living there you go. It makes sense. But that would be the profile of someone that would take Greece. Another profile of someone that's not interested in the passport, someone that just wants to have a residency in Greece and have the residency papers in Greece linked to their real estate investment. And it would be like people, I don't know, a couple in their 60s, they don't have children, or children are grown up, they're not interested in being part of the whole process. That also makes sense. So because they don't really care about having a passport at the end of the line.
They just want to be able to live their retirement in Greece. That makes sense. If you have residency, you can't go live in another country in Europe. It really isn't like a
No,
ticket to the EU. Yes, you could travel, but you have to stay in that country.
links to, yes. There are specific, once you get the residency through the golden visa, most of them are usually, they call temporary residency. It's when you get the permanent residency or the citizenship that allows you to sometimes have change your residency from EU countries to others. And again, I won't even get into it because there's limitations between which country you can choose to live in according to your permanent residency. So yes, it's not a free-for-all to live in Europe. You'll still have access to Europe as a Schengen resident 90 days every 6 months. So you'll be able to go to Italy, go to other countries of your choosing for a specific amount of time as a tourist. And then you would have to go back to either Portugal, Greece, Malta to live, or go back to the original country, United States, because that's very important. To keep the residencies, most of them will not require you to live there. The residencies for golden visa are almost all the time, if not all, linked to the investment. So as long as you keep the investment, you can renew the residency. They won't ask you to live there. Living there is the citizenship play. So we have to do the distinction. And that brings me to a very important subject. A lot of our clients come in with a predisposition, with a story in their head. I want this. But then they want this, and I tell them what's the restrictions. Then they start changing their mind. They're like, oh, okay, that doesn't fit what I need. Because there's table talks. There's my friend did this 5 years ago, and then jurisdictions changed, investment grade changed, investment mediums changed. So it's very important to do a little bit of reverse engineering when we talk to our client, and that's where our expertise come in. So we have to break down all the predisposition, pre-thoughts on what they want, and really make them understand what's out there, what's available, and which one fits better their needs.
And that's where your resources are so valuable. And I want to switch gears and let's go from Europe to the Caribbean. So those programs have changed. There's been some restrictions. EU had some issues with the requirements. Talk about that and
Yes.
how those are changing.
So there's some stereotypes about these kind of products, because you would assume that because they're in the Caribbeans, it's easier to change my name when I get a new passport. It's easier to bypass security. Even if I have a criminal record or a police certificate that's negative about me, I can still get a Caribbean passport. And I can't comment on past issues, but I can tell you that it's very restrictive today. We're looking at a amount of due diligence that's done for the Caribbean passport before you get the passport are as strict, if not stricter, than certain visas or Schengen residencies that are given, simply because these passports give you access as a visa-free travel to Europe. So everything is done with Interpol, everything is done in accordance with very strict rules. And because of that, some countries, not all of them, had to up their prices to make it even not less accessible, but to make sure that the passport, that investment that you do to acquire the passport are substantial. So they're bringing in a certain of clientele that will be high net worth. Back in the day, you could have invested 100,000 USD, and all of a sudden you're a citizenship of X country in the Caribbean, and that gave you access to Europe as visa-free travel if your original passport was not granting you that. And we're not talking about high net worth people that can find 100,000 USD. You can easily borrow left and right. That's not the kind of people that they were looking for. They upped their prices for the donation. They upped their prices for the investment, the real estate investment, and now they're substantial investment required. Let's say for a family of four, you're looking at between 350 to 450,000 of investment in the Caribbean. So we're not talking about peanuts here. So you need to be some sort of comfortable in terms of assets to invest in there. Yeah, I wouldn't want to comment on past scandals or past things that happened that saw certain countries get certain visas revoked, etc. But what I can tell you today is that the Caribbean passport are a legitimate way of getting access to Europe as long as you comply and show like that you are whiter than white in terms of documentation and source of funds and police certificate. They're very adamant on that.
Okay, got it. Let's talk about the UAE's Golden Visa by Nomination program.
Yeah, the UAE Golden Visa by nomination that we offer at Arton Capital is actually exclusive. It's not something that you would find off the books. There's different visas, and we offer them still at our company with our office in Dubai. There's visas that are linked to real estate investments that are quite substantial. Again, we're talking about 2 million dirhams, which is 600,000 USD. We're talking about visas that would require you to create companies and to create a lot of employments and it becomes restrictive that you have to renew it every 2 years. Arton Capital offers a golden visa by nomination, where if you had an interesting career, you have interesting thoughts for the Middle East, specifically for the United Arab Emirates, you're looking at bringing investments or looking at bringing new ideas, innovative ideas, you have an interesting CV, interesting network, we will take your bio, we will consider it, and then submit it to the authorities to be able to choose you as a person of interest for the Golden Visa by nomination. And again, that's a product that's exclusive to Arton Capital. We've been in the Middle East and United Arab Emirates for quite some time now.
Okay. How do you think the rise of the digital nomad visas and some of the remote work opportunities are going to impact the residency by investment programs?
I think it will impact them on a short term, but at the end of the day, a lot of my clients that call us and that are looking for products that are digital nomads, that are looking for products of investing less money in creating companies and reverting capital back to them, etc. They ask you to, again, live there to be able to renew your residency. They ask you to show financial statements. They ask you to show a direct and indirect employments. They're asking you the digital nomad jurisdiction also changes a lot. The rules change a lot, where golden visas, they tend to remain sensibly the same. And then my clients are usually business owners, whether men, women, their family descendants, trust funds, so dynasties in certain cases. And the digital nomad visas are not something that interests them, or the restrictive working visa. But there will always be a demand. It's just that demand will not impact how golden visas and residencies visas by investment are either on demand or perceived.
Okay. Having worked closely with governments and high worth individuals, what are some common misconceptions that you think people might have about this process?
Common misconception from the outside is that our clients are running away from something.
Okay.
That's very often that's what we get, that these programs are backdoor programs when they're not. They're programs that are public, that you can easily find information on government website, down to the fees that you have to pay. And of course, our clients are absolutely the opposite. Our client, as I said, the strict security process is so tight that even us as a firm, we cannot onboard them if they don't pass our due diligence in KYC, which is know your client. We haven't even started onboarding them in terms of paperwork. We haven't even created a service agreement yet. We make them pass a due diligence to make sure that they're cleared towards 16 databases, going from FBI, CIA to Interpol, for financial crimes, and even articles about them online. We take 48 hours time to see what kind of reputational damage can be done to our firm if we onboard the client, and also to the program, to the certain country, because the last thing you want is to bring people that can bring reputational damage, a golden visa that could eventually have it canceled if something comes out in the press. The other misconception is that the money is gone when you invest, which is not true. Yes, sometimes there is certain losses, sometimes there's a capital gain, sometimes there's profit, and sometimes there's returns. So it's really, you have to take the time to choose the right product for you, and to see what risk factor you're more comfortable with. The other one is that these programs are made to make you rich as an investor, which is also not the case. The return on investment that's immediate to you is to actually gain a golden visa or a citizenship by investment without having to do much work, because a lot of people that have gotten citizenship other ways, as I said, they have to start paying taxes in that country. They have to live there. They have to find employment. They have to start paying certain fees in terms of social fees. So golden visas, the real return is to get an easy or a easier path to the residency and to the citizenship. But yeah, there's misconceptions like that we have to always deal with clients, that they think they're going to make a 20% return on an investment, and at the same time get a villa in Greece that's eligible for residency, and just everything has to be to their advantage. But they have to understand that these kind of products are geared towards, one, bringing an investment, a new investment to the country that offers this golden visa, and you get your papers in return.
Fair enough. So I know you're not a tax advisor, but I'm sure you've interacted with Americans specifically. The U.S. government taxes
Mhm.
us on our worldwide income. You don't even have to be born in the US and they will tax you.
Yeah.
So for Americans thinking about what play makes sense for them, are there any unique tax situations that benefit Americans or
There's different, and now I'm not giving advice. I'm just saying what is available for everybody to read. There's for Portugal, there's non-habitual taxation. There is that is linked to the golden visa. Greece also does it. They give you a small taxation if you start living there. So they won't tax you the same way as if you were a resident working in Greece. There's certain predispositions that you have. If you have international income, it gets taxed differently if you have a golden visa. All that to say that it's very important to talk to your tax advisor before you make a move, or during the move, or even after the move. And also, as we know, in Europe or in the Caribbean or other places, you start getting taxed according to the local laws once you start living there. People get often confused as if they get a residency or a citizenship by investment, they start thinking that they need to do a double taxation. But they're not doing double taxation. They have to understand that residency by investment or citizenship by investment is not a fiscal resident. You
yes?
only start being a fiscal resident once you live there.
Yeah.
So once you live there, then you better have your taxation in order.
Oh
Talking
yeah, I
about
live in Spain. So this is a thing that really surprises people. So Americans think that US taxes are so high and then they become fiscal residents in Spain. One of the things Spain does is they have a tax on your worldwide assets. If
Mhm.
every year you're supposed to attest to what all of your worldwide assets are,
Yeah,
and then they tax you on them. And so these are really important things to be aware of before
mm,
you make a move, right? You need to really understand how it's going to shake out. And there is the tax treaties, but they only go up to a certain amount. So if we're talking about a high net worth individual, you're going to blow it past that double
yeah,
tax.
exactly. So that's why a lot of our clients, especially if they have an important network, they won't start living there. It's more of a play where, let's say, if they get a Portuguese residency that can lead to the passport. The passport is really for their children, or a bonus because a dual citizenship is allowed both countries from Portugal and the United States. And again, unlike United States, Portugal doesn't start taxing you until you start living there. So you basically have a passport for your children, and your children, if they are older, they don't have to ask for work permits to go work in Europe later on if they want to switch between North America and Europe. There's or they have access also to education in Europe. There's certain treaties, so that's very, very important for certain clients that are high net worth that are looking for the future. But yes, it's very important to talk to your tax advisor. And again, it's something that you should not overlook, especially if you're looking at relocation. Then you better have your taxes in order.
Absolutely. All right. As we wrap up, for listeners who are considering a second residency or citizenship, what's one piece of advice you'd want to give them to help them future-proof their global mobility?
One piece of advice is to call me. It can be very overwhelming, especially with all the emotional distress sometimes that people can live, especially in the United States, as I said, with everything that's a bit uncertain. Whether it's warranted or not, it's always good to have someone that knows what they're talking about by your side. So the first thing to do is to give us a call, give you a call, and ask for advice. What should I do? And most of the time, especially us, we give that advice free of charge. It's not something that we charge for. I always take the time to listen to the client, to take away the emotional aspect of the whole thing, because most of the time those calls, especially the first one, is often emotional. So talk to someone that's a pro in the field, a migration specialist, and that to make sure that they are migration specialists for golden visas and citizenship by investment, so they know that they're talking to someone that has a substantial network that knows what they're talking about. So the advice is my number one advice. Quid pro
Perfect.
quo.
Mohammed, thank you so much for sharing all of your insight today. I think You're clearly an expert on this topic, and I feel so good knowing that I can send my clients to you when they want to explore the Golden Visa or residency by investment program. So thank you. I'm going to include Mohammed's calendar link in the show notes below. So you can contact him directly and have a conversation. If you are looking to buy real estate in a foreign country and you're looking for a real estate agent who speaks English, we can help. In the show notes, we have a buyer questionnaire. Fill that out. Let us know where you want to go, what you're looking for, your time frame, and we'll match you with a real estate agent who can help you with your real estate search. We offer this service for free, and as a thank you for letting us connect you with a real estate agent, we will send you up to $1,000 at closing when you buy a property through the agent we refer you to. So check that out. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Live and Invest Abroad. Until next time, keep exploring, keep investing, and keep living the life you dream of.